Okay, I think the floor is yours.
Okay, well, thanks to Stu for inviting me to give this presentation on Marxist humanism. Marxist humanism is important for our current affairs class because it's the basic political philosophy for some of our most prominent American actors like Bernie Sanders or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or Zohran Mamdani. In the first minute of his victory speech, Mamdani quoted the great hero of American socialism and Marxist humanism, Eugene V. Debs. Mamdani said, "Thank you, my friends. The sun may have set over our city this evening, but as Eugene Debs once said, I can see the dawn of a better day for humanity." And that aim for humanity is what Marxist humanism is concerned with. Another famous Marxist humanist is Erich Fromm, the social psychologist. Among other books, he wrote The Sane Society and Marx's Concept of Man. Marxist humanism is also the basic political philosophy for socialism around the world, not only in Europe, but in China too. The Chinese constitution states that it's committed to the principle of Marxism and Leninism. By Marxism, it means Marxist humanism. And both the Chinese Communist Party and the common Chinese person believe in Marxist humanist values, like opposing class domination, showing respect for other people, and working to improve social conditions. China is not a dictatorship, nor is it led by a plutocracy like we have in the United States. In other words, the rich don't govern China. One of the basic humanistic policies of the Chinese Communist Party is to strive to achieve common prosperity. And that's not just talk. In 2022, the World Bank announced that China had lifted 800 million of its own people out of poverty, while poverty is growing in the USA. Marxist humanism has been very successful in China. Chinese approval rates of their political system range in the mid 80% to low 90%. American rates of approval for their government are usually below the mid 30s, and for Congress, it's often in the teens. And if you don't believe what I said about the Chinese are happy with their political system, just ask your favorite AI source how the Chinese in China feel about their political system. They live in a different world than we do. They live in a world of Marxist humanism. I can't say that the old Soviet Union was based on Marxist humanism, especially under Stalin. It was too dictatorial and to be humanistic. The old Soviet Union was Marxist in name only, like Cambodia under Pol Pot or North Korea today. Of course, the philosophy of Marxist humanism begins with the writings of Karl Marx. Marx was born in Trier, Germany in 1818. His father was a lawyer, his family was Jewish, but religion really wasn't important to them. His father converted to the Lutheran Church because that was better for business. His father wanted Marx to become a lawyer, but instead Marx earned a Ph.D. in philosophy, and that was awarded in 1841. Marx worked as a journalist after graduate school. He mixed in philosophy with his journalistic writings. He often wrote criticisms of religion, and he mocked other philosophers for engaging in religious-like thinking rather than using empirical thinking. One of the most popular philosophers Marx attacked was George Friedrich Hegel. These criticisms made Marx's writings popular with many readers. Marx laid the foundation for Marxist humanism early in his career. In 1844, he wrote a critique of Hegel combined with a critique of religion. This critique of religion would become the philosophical foundation for Marxist humanism. Unfortunately, Marx used the word man a lot in his writings. That was the custom in the 19th century Germany. So when I quote him, it may sound sexist, but Marx actually favored the emancipation of women as well as of men. Regarding religion, Marx declared that man makes religion. Religion does not make man. And he said man is part of the real world, and the real world conditions are the practical result of politics, not a creation of some divine providence. It's the opium of the people. Religion keeps people in a dreamy stupor that prevents them from seeing the reality of their oppressed and exploited conditions. Marx's criticism of religion became the model for how to criticize political conditions. That is, to unmask what the ruling class says and show the realities of the exploitation of the working class. Sorry, I had a little computer glitch. So, as I was saying, Marx began developing the philosophy of Marxist humanism as part of his combined critique of class exploitation and religion. The dominant religion in Germany at that time was Christianity, part of it Catholicism, part of it Lutheranism. As the basis for his critique, Marx stated his firm belief that the only way for humanity to liberate itself from class exploitation is to adopt that principle which declares man to be the supreme being for man. Marx's declaration that man is the supreme being for man is a declaration of a value premise. And this value premise guided all his writings for the rest of his life. The supremacy of human value is the basic premise or foundation of Marxist humanism. Marx is probably best known for his writings about the capitalist system, but his analysis of the capitalist system was not meant to be a textbook on economics. It was meant to be a revelation of how the capitalist system degrades humanity and does not honor man as the supreme being for man. In fact, capitalism treats the human worker as an appendage to a machine. The worker is often less valuable to the capitalist than the machine. Of course, Marx's observations are still true today. The worker is valued as a mere instrument to increasing the wealth of the capitalist. If workers are mere instruments, then they are far from being their own supreme being. Workers treat themselves as commodities whose labor is to be sold for the price of wages. In other words, workers have been conditioned in the capitalist system to agree that they are instruments, and they only disagree with the employers over the price to be paid for their labor. It was Marx's intention that the basic purpose of Marxist humanism is to identify and rectify any situation in which human value is degraded. Marxist humanism continued to develop after Marx's death in 1883. Friedrich Engels and other writers contributed to Marxist philosophy. I mentioned Erich Fromm. My favorite Marxist humanism book is called Marx at the Millennium by Cyril Smith. Came out in 1998, and it's free online. One insight that became clear among 20th century Marxist humanists is that the denigration of human value is a condition that makes going to war easier. Whenever the ruling class of one nation thinks they can profit from going to war with another nation, the propaganda machine goes to work to try to make the human beings in the other country appear to be monsters or devils or some kind of vermin that needs to be eradicated. But to believe that man is the supreme being for man would make going to war much more difficult than it is. If the warriors are going off to save humanity from subhuman villains, then it's easier to do. Both sides in war try to dehumanize the other. The Nazi propaganda of Joseph Goebbels tried to make Slavic people, Russians, the Polish, and Jews into subhuman creatures. Then they would be easier to kill for the German soldiers. These soldiers were told that they were superior beings because they were Aryans. American propaganda in World War II cast the Germans as monstrous Huns who wanted to take away our freedom. In Vietnam, they were gooks, not fellow human beings, and certainly not the supreme beings for man. From the point of view of Marxist humanism, religion also facilitates the value system of war propaganda. By devaluing humanity as really nothing compared to the value of God, religion institutionalizes the dehumanization and debasement of humanity. In effect, it blesses all sorts of dehumanization. Another instance in which people commonly fail to treat themselves as their own supreme beings is in everyday language. In political dialogue, when somebody disagrees with the political opinions or the policies of another human being, each side often seeks to dehumanize the other. President Trump called Democratic Representative Ilhan Omar and the Somali immigrants in Minnesota garbage. People who identify with the Democratic Party will sometimes denigrate President Trump as a pig, a dog, or a rat, and call his supporters subhuman Neanderthals. Of course, folks who identify with the Republican Party will use similar words for their perceived political enemies, the Democrats. They're sometimes dehumanized by being called herd animals or unthinking zombies. Ironically, both Democratic Party and Republican Party identifiers often think of themselves as independent thinkers while they follow the party line. Marxist humanism criticizes any language or religious teaching in all social and economic conditions that denigrate human value instead of honoring humans as the supreme beings for humanity. While Marx was a purist in his criticism of religion, there are people who agree with his valuation of humanity as supreme while keeping their religious beliefs separate from their political philosophy. For example, there are Christian Marxist humanists and Muslim Marxist humanists. These people can be found among American Democratic Socialists. Actually, Karl Marx was the first Democratic Socialist. Marxist humanism is the basic philosophical premise of democratic socialism. As the election of Zohran Mamdani shows, democratic socialism includes the humanistic belief that socialism can be realized through democratic processes. And where this can be done, no violence is needed. The supreme value of humanity is honored by pursuing political change without violence. Karl Marx declared over 150 years ago that there are countries, such as America and England, where the workers may attain their goals by peaceful means. And ironically, in a New York City newspaper, the New York World, published on July 18, 1871, Marx said, "The way to show political power in Britain lies open to the working class. Insurrection would be madness, where peaceful agitation would more swiftly and surely do the work." Then, as if prophetically describing our own times with homelessness and affordability as major problems, Marx wrote, "Let us sum it all up in a word. The working classes remain poor amid the increase of wealth, and wretched amid the increase of luxury. Their material privation dwarfs their moral as well as their physical stature. They cannot rely on others for a remedy. It's become necessary for them to take their own case in hand." Marx said, "They must revive the relations between themselves and the capitalists and the landlords, and that means they must transform society." Zohran Mamdani is an excellent example of Marxist humanism being put into action. Mamdani is using peaceful means to help balance the power between the working class and the capitalists and landlords in New York City. This is just what Marx called for. In conclusion, then, the philosophy of Marxist humanism has influence all over the world, and in the U.S., it is part of a completely peaceful and growing political movement. So, thanks for listening.
So we have a couple of hands. First, Eiley, we're going to recognize you. If you could please unmute. Are you there, Eiley? Good. We can hear you, Eiley. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. And it sure reflects how theory and practice don't always coincide. But my question is, how does China's one-child practice reflect Marxist humanism? China's one-child policy?
Yes, he's unmuting.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah, well, first of all, China's one-child policy is no longer in effect. So that's
so
one consideration.
they
Huh?
found the error of their ways, or they just decided to throw Marx off the table?
Well, Marx didn't say anything about that kind of a policy. They they made that policy when people were starving all over the place, and so they needed to have fewer mouths to feed. But as I said, they've since really Deng Xiaoping in the early 80s, China has lifted 800 million people out of poverty, and they've stopped that one-child policy thing because it wasn't necessary anymore. So that was a policy based on the poverty during the day.
Thank you.
Mm.
Thank you. Next is Gloria Dabs-Mann. Can you unmute, Gloria?
Oh, Bill, how do China is now very much an industrial country, and they're selling their goods to other countries. And so they need a greater workforce. And doesn't a greater workforce lift you out of poverty? And where do you get these statistics from? I mean, I don't know where you get your statistics that 800 million people are lifted out of China, out of poverty.
Mhm.
The United States has problems, and yes, people call Donald Trump names and people call other people names, but China is basically a homogeneous country. I mean, as much as I have things that I don't like about the United States, I know it's a great country because it has multi-ethnic people that it has lifted at times, okay?
Mhm.
And it allows multi-ethnic people to give their grievances. China doesn't have that, and I don't know what they would do. So what is your response to that?
Well, first of all, China has at least 50 different ethnic groups and subcultures among the 1.4 billion people who live there.
Do they have Latinos and blacks there? No.
They have lots of different ethnic groups.
I'm not talking about ethnic, I'm talking about racial groups now.
Well, I don't know if race is a real concept, we're all human beings.
I know,
first of
we all
all.
are human beings, but it does
Yeah.
have a political consequence based on the color of your skin and your hair and all that shit. Okay?
Yeah. Yeah, they have a lot of different subcultures, and for a long time they were very difficult to organize, but they've organized them now, and the statistics that I use, the 800 million people, that's from the World Bank. They study these things, so it's not like I'm popping it out of myself. It's standard, and anything I've said, you can check with your favorite AI resource and it'll be confirmed.
Okay, and my last question that you didn't address is how did China lift these people out of poverty? And I suggest they lifted them out with industrialization and selling their products to other countries and
Uh,
engaging in trade, which is kind
yeah,
of capitalist behavior.
yeah. Well, first of all, you can call the Chinese system market socialism, and it really got started after Bill Clinton uh, encouraged American capitalists to invest in smaller countries. So they went into China to invest there and to build factories and to take advantage of the cheap Chinese labor. What they didn't count on was the Chinese said, okay, you can build our factory and we'll supply the cheap labor, but you have to teach our people how you manage your companies, how you make your product. And they learned everything they could about the capitalists. Then they went out and they made their own factories and started making their own product. And it wasn't just cheap labor that got them rich. It was the intelligent manufacturing base that they created, and which is famous now for its efficiency and its skill, and
it's
so
low wages, and it's very
they
low
made
wages.
yeah they made their wealth by smart manufacturing and sales.
Okay, thank you.
Bill, before you go on, could you address the first point that Gloria talked about in terms of China's treatment of the Uyghurs?
Well, so the Uyghurs are one of those 50 plus groups that's in China, and they're located up in the northeastern part of China, the northwestern part of China. You know, where they have all the stands, Uzbekistan and
Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan?
yeah, that's right. So the Uyghurs tend to identify more with the stands than they do with the Chinese, and they've been a hostile group that wants to separate from mainland China. So there was a time when their protests were violent and they killed police. So China has had to crack down on the dissidents, but it's only the dissidents that get affected, and the state that they live in is treated as well as any other state, and it's even given what they call autonomy status. So the Uyghurs are in a sense self-governing, and their state, their area is prospering, but the news media doesn't tell you that. It only says, oh, there's this reform school, and they put the Uyghurs in reform school, and it's terrible. But when you look at the whole picture, what they're doing is favoring those people as much as anybody else.
Thank you. Next is Richard Matthias.
Bill, I really appreciate this talk, and I think I've always held a certain real curiosity about Marx, and I didn't study him much, but so much of that philosophy seems so practical and so valid. But I have some questions regarding China, People's Republic and People's Republic of Korea, two communist nations. Number one, suppose you're a Chinese citizen and you object to the system of government, and you object to Xi, and you begin proclaiming your disdain for it all, and that you wish to embrace another system of government, and suppose you're in a college, just anywhere. Do you have the freedom to speak openly and against policies of the country? Because that's not the impression that comes from the way the country is managed, and dissidents that speak out are dealt with. So number one, there's that. The next question is, there's no free and open elections among the population, popular vote. And this democratic notion that we're trying to make work with a lot of difficulty here, that system of democratic or even democratic socialism that is espoused, that combines some of these Marxist things, why not in China? Why? And you say it's not a dictatorship. That may very well be if the dictator definition includes great repression and a lot of other negative concepts. But what about those two factors of open freedom among the population and free and open elections?
Okay, so I mentioned that in the Constitution, it says that they employ Lenin's political philosophy, which is on a lower scale than Marx, but it's democratic centralism is what it's called. And democratic centralism, as it's practiced in China and largely in Cuba as well, is at the local level, people are free to say anything they want to say. And they have regular meetings with the local government, and they have regular meetings with the local representatives of the Communist Party. And they talk about policies, they talk about leadership, and anybody can say anything they want. Then they take votes on the leaders at the local level, the cities, and they call them provinces, but they're states, and they have governors, and they vote for those people. So that part is as open as anything in the U.S. I mean, it's like the town hall meetings in Maine. So that part is not oppressive. Then the higher personnel of the Communist Party are drawn from those people who have experienced the democratic centralism at the local level. So they don't have national elections like we do. So Xi Jinping was not elected, but he was once elected as a governor in a local province, and he was a mayor of Shanghai for a while. So the people they draw up are people with experience at the local level. Basically, then they don't have national elections, and they don't allow organizations that say we want to overthrow communism and have a capitalist system.
What happens to those people? One
Questions,
final,
Richard?
yeah, I understand that, and that there's some meaningful facts to consider there. One final question then. Explain Tiananmen Square and what the result was. That I mean, is that what you're saying? These people said, we don't want your system anymore. We want something else. We want more ability to speak out. And so weren't they repressed? Wasn't that a massive incarceration?
Yeah, it was Tiananmen Square was a catastrophe, and many students were killed by the army, and the guys in the Communist Party who were responsible for that got in a hell of a lot of trouble because the Communist Party didn't support that. And it was like, in China, there's the old Maoists who want to do like Chairman Mao all the time. And then there's the more liberal people. And the Maoists are the ones who made the decisions to go in there and kill a lot of students. And so that's a blot on their record, but it's not a reflection of Communist Party policy.
Thank you. Next is Dr. Alan Buchan.
Bill, I want to thank you for your presentation. It was
Welcome.
surprisingly good, the most interesting presentation of many that we've ever had in this class.
Thank you.
Thank you. I agree with you that communism has worked in China, and your figures are very impressive, with 800 some million Chinese being brought out of poverty. But it may have to do somewhat with the background of China in their religion for the last 2,000 to 3,000 years, and being Buddhism and all the other aspects of the religion which seem to unite the people. And it is truly dramatic and impressive what China has done. But that doesn't seem to have been repeated elsewhere in other communist countries, certainly not in Russia and many other communist countries, most other communist countries. Communism has been a failure. I agree that it's really nice if people can work together in a socialist way. I'm currently reading a book on FDR and the extraordinary times of his. And it was because of his policies, as I read this book, I'm astounded that it was because of his policies that the United States actually effectively resisted Germany. If we did not have his policies and him existing at that time, this country would have collapsed into the German rule, as would the entire European continent. So communism worked in Russia. Communism worked in China. I wish it could work as well somewhere else. The people do. I've looked it up, and you're right. 80%, 90% of the people are very pleased with how communism has worked in China. Too bad it can't work that way anywhere else.
Well, I could comment about how China made it from before the Communist Party system, before 1949. Before 1949, people were starving all over, and there were warlords in all kinds of different places. And this is one of the things that Mao Zedong did. Once they started fighting with the Kuomintang, which are the ones that were pro-capitalist, they started chasing the communists around, and Mao Zedong was able to organize the peasant class of China and get them behind the Communist Party. It was his organizing that really made the Communist Party big and had popular support. So that's one of the reasons why they were able to have their great success, because they all had this fantastic team spirit.
Mute yourself, John.
So I read books by the guys, the business guys who were able to make it big in China, and they all say, we did it for China. We want to get rich, but we did it for China. We want to make China better. And so that's a different, their different attitude was really based on their belief in Mao Zedong's persuasion that the Communist Party really cared about them and their common prosperity.
Thank you, Bill. Next is John Medlin. You can unmute, John.
I certainly agree that the China has made incredible progress for over 300 million of its citizens being taken out of poverty in the last 40 years.
800.
From the WTO in 1990, I believe it was, under Clinton.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions and a couple of comments. First of all, the local elections concept is pretty common for the entire cultural Asian history. In Vietnam, the hamlets and the village people, they had democracy there before the United States even existed. You elected the hamlet chief, and then the village chief, and all that sort of stuff. And that's basically where you stop, because you then had the mandarins to get up to the province and the national level. So that's pretty common. It's been around a long time. I guess when you talked about the human spirit, everybody got on a team spirit and all that. I don't believe you mentioned the fact that the Great Leap Forward in early 1960, over 30 million Chinese starved to death under the leadership of Mao Zedong. So there's some real problems. But I guess the thing I'm really curious about, and maybe I misunderstood what you were talking about. I think you said something about the Western religions have something about some type of supreme God or something like that. And then if I heard it correctly, or maybe I misheard you, that it's instead of having a supreme God, it's the supreme human. Is that correct? And if so, what is the supreme human?
No, I didn't say that. Western religions have a supreme God, but it's a God with human characteristics. I don't think I even said that. Oh, I know. I think Marx said that God is in their image, is in man's image. Man's not in God's image. That's all.
So is man supreme, or is there if there's not a supreme God, is there a supreme man, or or is there a difference, or does it exist?
Okay, so in Marx's use of the word supreme, it's a value principle. So making man the supreme being for man. is a value principle. There's no higher value than human beings. For religion, the highest value is God. And so that's what Marx used to say. He liked to turn things on their head, you know. So he
Well,
turned that value system on its head.
the Germans believe in having a supreme man also, is the Aryan nation. That's why they wiped out about 30 million people around the world. So I have a real problem with the supreme.
Oh yeah, okay. So let me finish. So we're talking about supreme, but I'm using one meaning and you're using another. Your use of the word supreme is supreme power. And Marx didn't talk about supreme power. He talked about supreme value. So that's the difference. Yeah.
Well, that's why they want to have a supreme Aryan race with their supreme values.
Yeah, Marx had nothing to do with that. So
Okay.
so that was something else.
It's very easy to jump for supreme values. So because you have a right color skin, all this other sort of stuff. So when you start saying supreme values of humans, it's very easy to jump into very horrible things. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Rose Dosty. Rose, thank you. You're
Yes,
ready.
thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Very interesting. I just wanted to ask you if you personally have lived in a Marxist society.
No,
Have you ever been to China?
no.
Have you? Well, which
I've been to Cuba.
Okay. Which of the communist-leaning countries would you say has achieved any measure of success that China has as far as Marxism goes?
Well, there are other Asian nations that are doing fantastic. Vietnam is almost as much of a economic success as China. And you know what happened in Vietnam? We lost there. The communists drove us out, and then they built this fantastic society.
What about humanism in Vietnam? How does that rate?
I can't say that I know Vietnam's take on Marx. So I just, I don't know what their thinking is.
I had one more thing. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Thank you.
Rose. Okay, I think that's it for the hands. Thank you very much, Bill.
You're welcome.
Well done. Well done. Well done.
Thank
Well
you.
done.